Hello and welcome everyone to our special monthly series of webinars on Book Creator. Tonight's focus is increasing writing in math with Book Creator. If you're joining us live tonight, you can see my screen with our keynote presentation. You'll notice I'm toggling between the slides as well as managing the questions that'll come in your GoToWebinar control panel. You are muted this evening for the webinar. If you have any questions, I'm going to be asking you to put them in the question box. If you want to say hello right now, I'd love to give some shout outs. You can type your name into the question box with where you're from. That'll be the space that you'll communicate with me this evening. If you are watching this on the recording on YouTube and you have questions as you're listening, you can always reach out to the team at bookcreator.com or email me directly, monica@classtechtips.com. I'm excited to see we have Leanne from the Boston area with us. We have Marla from Toronto, Diana from Burlington, Massachusetts. We have Kathy from Wisconsin, Jason from Indiana, Carol from Rochester. I know I'll be up there for Nice Skate before you know it in November, Carol, and a few other messages coming through. So we're going to go ahead and jump in to tonight's webinar, Increasing Writing in Math with Book Creator. This is part of our monthly Book Creator series, so if you're watching this live with us, you're here for our special August webinar. In September, we'll be focusing on writing in response to reading with Book Creator. In October, we have our next monthly series and on through the fall. If you're joining us after the live webinar, you can check out the Book Creator YouTube channel where the video recordings for our webinars are being held. So you can check it out there, and this recording, for those of you joining us live, will be up there as well. So our focus this evening is to talk about how you can use Book Creator as a tool to increase writing in math. So whether you are teaching with kindergartners or high school students, Book Creator is a dynamic, customizable creation tool that you can use for all sorts of tasks. And we're going to focus on Book Creator from a math lens today. But before we jump in, I'd love to learn a little bit about you all. First and foremost, I'm going to launch our first poll question. How familiar are you with Book Creator? You can choose one of the following. And I'll see some of our votes. About half of us have voted. Go ahead and select on the screen. Right now, with those of you that have voted, our breakdown, it looks like about 70%. So just about 2/3 actually, as the rest of the votes come in, have played around with Book Creator before. About 1/4 of you are new to Book Creator, which is great. If you are brand new to Book Creator and I'm mentioning something that is just a little too much above your familiarity with the tool, you can check out one of our upcoming Getting Started with Book Creator series. We're doing them monthly. So just where you signed up for this on bookcreator.com, you can check out those Getting Started webinars if you're totally new to Book Creator. And next question, you can choose more than one, since I know some of us wear multiple hats in school. Select the grade levels that you work with. So what is your primary age range of the students that you work with? You might check more than one if you have that kind of role. So it looks like about half of you work with K2 students. About 2/3 of you work with 3 to 5 students, grades 3 to 5 during the day. And then we have about 1/4 working with middle school and about 18% working with high school students. So some people casting a wide net or just working with a few. And finally, what is your role in education? Are you a classroom teacher? Are you technology support staff? Maybe that includes a media specialist, a school admin. If you fall into that other category, it looks like a few of us do, you can always type that into the question box as well. So it looks like more than half of us today are classroom teachers, and then we have about a fifth who are technology support staff. You can tell I'm trying to use all my fraction and percentage conversions, and we're talking about math today. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the webinar. Again, as we go through, if you have questions, we'll be pausing periodically, and you can go ahead and type them into the question box. So if you are totally new to Book Creator, which it sounds like some of our group tonight is, Book Creator is an open-ended creation tool. You can use it to create and publish books. So your final products are perfect for authentic or real audiences to interact with. The experience is completely customizable. So tonight we're talking about math, Book Creator in the math classroom to increase writing, but you might use this in English language arts, in a Spanish language class. A phrase I use all the time is tasks before apps, right? So really thinking what your learning objective is, and then how Book Creator can be used to really make that experience special for your students. So again, if you have some lingering questions about Book Creator, the Getting Started webinars up on the YouTube channel or the live ones coming up, our next one's in September, you can sign up for that, and we'll do more of that'll be an hour-long webinar and a deep dive into this really fantastic tool. So when we're talking today about Book Creator in the math classroom, just some general best practices when you start thinking about the type of activities you're going to introduce to students, whether that's a daily activity or something that's going to take place over a long period of time. You want to make sure that you have clear expectations so students understand what it is they're going to be doing when they have this device in their hand. You'll want to model for students. That might be how to use this button or that button, but also what your thought process is as you're choosing images or snapping a picture or composing a sentence with that great math vocabulary. You'll want to practice the workflow so that you and your students are familiar with how their books are going to be created and shared. So if you know, for example, that your students are going to be counting coins on their desk as part of a math activity, you can have them practice laying them out, snapping a picture, and then recording their voice on the page. So that's what we're talking about when we say just really thinking through the workflow and what you want students to be able to do within the tool. It's wonderful to provide options for students. So as we move through some of the different features of Book Creator and how it can be leveraged from the math perspective, you might decide that some of those options include giving students different ways to document their learning, giving students different ways to show what they know, and that could be something where you're giving choices based on interests, or you're differentiating based on the individual needs of students. So maybe that is something to do with children who are fluent in the English language, but have trouble with writing out in English, right? They might have different options. So as we go through today and we talk a little bit about what it can look like for differentiation and supporting many different types of writing in the math classroom, these are just some best practices to really lay the foundation of our conversation. So before we jump into the tool and I show you some different things that you can add on your page specifically for the math class, I want to share with you a few different stories. And so these are stories that are on the blog, so on bookcreator.com's blog. If you go to their website and you toggle and you look up in the right-hand corner, you'll see the blog option. And this is where some of these stories come from. And you'll see down here at the bottom, this is a bit.ly. So if you type in the bit.ly with this part of the link, or you just take a screenshot, save it for later, or you just go to Book Creator and you search for this on their page, you'll find different ways teachers are using Book Creator in their classroom. Now, this is one of my favorite stories. It's actually from a fellow Apple Distinguished Educator, Christy Musey, who's a fantastic elementary school teacher. And so she has a blog post on Book Creator's website that tells the story about how her young students are using this tool to document their learning in the math classroom. So we're going to talk more about this Geoboard tool, Geoboard picture that you see on the page here. But right away you see some of the great things that her students are doing that we're going to break down a little bit. So having images on the page, labeling, using the drawing tool to point out different things. So lots of different options for really thinking about how you can use Book Creator to get students thinking and writing about math. And so this might be on a lower elementary school level, like you see with some of the labels here, or as we start thinking a little bit deeper for what it might look like in upper elementary school, middle school, and high school, just translating some of the expectations you would have for students on pencil and paper into a tool that's much more dynamic than what you may be doing in the past. This is another story that you can find on Book Creator's website. Again, that bit.ly down in the lower right-hand corner. So this teacher used a Book Creator to create all sorts of math riddles. So having students think about different math concepts. You can see some of the audio tool right there that we'll take a dive into in just a moment. So something where students are creating a product that's asking them to think deeply and write about what they are learning in their math classroom. So what I love about Book Creator as a creation tool is that you can use it across the content areas, and you might have students who would struggle to explain their thinking, say in the math classroom, have some options for maybe recording their voice, writing simple sentences, or building off of the drawings or illustrations they've made with writing. And this is a terrific story from another Apple Distinguished Educator and a wonderful middle school math teacher, Kathy Yanka, and you can check out this full blog post on Book Creator's website. Such a rock star teacher, and she shares how her students are using different tools and combining them with Book Creator to demonstrate their thinking about how to solve different math problems. You'll see, if you're familiar with the app Telegami, where students have that avatar and they can play that movie right within their Book Creator page to explain their thinking. They have the opportunity to combine text and the draw tool to write on the page. So this is especially helpful combining all these pieces of media to tell the story of how I solved a problem, to demonstrate thinking with steps, as well as providing clear and concise answers. So really just depends on what you've set your students up for and what those expectations look like. So before we dive into some of the ways you can use each tool or each feature within Book Creator, I want you to go into that question box and I want you to tell me, how are your students currently writing in math class? What are they expected to do when it comes to explaining their thinking? And I'm going to shout out some of your responses to this question. Up, and I gave that Kathy Yanka shout out, and excited to have you on here as well as I look through the question box. Let's see, so Kim shared that her students are writing in math in math journals that they might have to respond as part of an activity. I love the connection to the mathematical practices that Karen mentioned. So Patty shared that her students are expected to explain how they arrived at a particular answer. So that kind of step-by-step explanation. Karen shared how students are being reflective as writers in the math class by sharing new learnings as well. And students might even, as Patty mentioned, create a problem that they can solve or someone else can solve as well. And having students explain their thought process. So great. Thank you for those of you who shared some of the way your students are writing in the math class. Feel free to keep answering. We're going to pause periodically so that I have a chance to peek in and see some of the things that you are sharing. And when you put in the question box, it's something that I know I had a question there about it. It's something that I can see. And then I'm just sharing out and kind of giving shout outs to some of them. So don't be worried if you don't see other people's responses. They're just being sent straight to me in the question box there. So when we talk about writing expectations in the math classroom, there are different things you might have your students do at different parts of the year, different grade level expectations. Things might change with different units, but just some things to think about when you are reflecting on the way that your students are this past year or currently writing in math, and some of the ways you might have them go ahead and continue or push their writing and thinking into next year or into the next unit you're doing. So really identifying the vocabulary that is so important for students to take ownership of, not only when they are talking about math, but when they are writing about math. So you might have your big words for a particular math unit, up in a bulletin board in the corner of your classroom, but really making sure that students are redirected to that list. Maybe it's something in their math folder or shared up on the board so that students know that these are the words they're supposed to include in their response. So for example, if you're asking students to solve a word problem with multi-digit addition, you might have your 4 or 5 key words that you want in their explanation. So they should be using all these set words depending on the particular unit you're working on, and that can help students really focus when they are telling that step by step of how they solved a problem. And so in addition to using great vocabulary when they are explaining their thinking or making an argument about the best way to solve a problem, it's important that students are writing in a way that they are ordering those steps in the correct order. So someone else could follow that recipe for success as they are solving a math problem and explaining their steps in the right order. You might set up students for success with this by giving them some sequence words like first, then, next, finally, the same way you might for having them retell a story in a reading classroom. Your expectations for your students as writers in the math classroom might include having them label, like we saw with the early elementary example of labeling different shapes, or it might be having them write in complete sentences, multi-paragraphs, and really clearly communicating those expectations to students, even having that teacher model that they can work off of as they are explaining their thinking or making an argument for solving a problem in a certain way. And pushing students to give thorough explanations as writers when they're working collaboratively or peer editing, depending on the level and the unit you're working on, can really help students push them to give a more thorough explanation. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go through and we're going to look at some of the different tools within BookReader. So if you're brand new to BookReader, just take a look at some of the pieces I point out. If you have some questions about where to find different things, you can always put that in the question box or take a look at one of the Getting Started webinars to kind of give that big overview of BookReader. So using the photo tool in the math classroom is extremely useful. You might have students snap a picture of the way they've arranged manipulatives on their desk. Maybe they're using base 10 blocks or pattern blocks, or maybe they're snapping a picture of something in the real world and labeling that and placing that on their page. You might have students upload an image. So maybe they have found something online that's an inspiration for a math story problem they're writing, or maybe they're taking that image that's a screenshot from a math app and adding that to their page. The purpose of the photo tool in the way we're talking about it today is to have students document their learning, so to capture those moments. So here's an example from one of my favorite suites of apps. The Math Learning Center has a range of apps for iPads that are completely free and great for the math classroom. And so I'll give them a shout out towards the end today. This is simply a screenshot. So you might have students on the page, on their number line page within the app, drawing, annotating, and having something wonderful happening with modeling thinking in this separate app. Well, they can take a screenshot of it and they can add it to their page. So when you want students to take an image and use the photo tool, up in the upper right hand corner, you'll see that plus sign, and they have a few different options. They can take a picture right in the moment. So if they have those manipulatives on their desk, or they have a real life moment that they want to capture in the math classroom, they can snap a picture. They can also record a video if they want to talk about something that just happened in math and put that on their page. Or what you see here is you're taking a screenshot from another app where math is happening and placing that picture on the page by using the tool that will take us out to our photos in the camera roll. In addition to using the photo tool, the draw tool is extremely useful within Book Creator. So you can have a picture of anything or a blank slate, and students can use the draw tool within Book Creator. So this gives them the option to annotate, so draw on top of an image, to sketch, to just draw on the page, or to write. So maybe your students are more comfortable writing out their words that are going to label their shape diagram and putting that on their page. So here's an example of an image, right? Just a quick snapshot, something in the real world. And you see again those options on the right-hand side. So those options for the photo, the camera, the pen tool. So we're looking here at the pen tool specifically. So when you are using the pen tool to add that drawing, so we're using this draw tool to annotate a particular image, you have the option to choose from different colors. So you can tap on any color that you want. If you look at that more option below the magenta there on the screen, you can even get a little more detailed if you're looking for that absolutely perfect purple or something in between one of the colors that you see here. So after you've chosen your color, which you see is right up here with the black dot at the top, next to it, you have the option to choose the width of the pen tool. So you can choose between the different options. So of course, just depending on what your students are looking to do, this is great for different levels, of course, but the color coding tool can be really useful if you're giving kids specific instructions like labeling a y-axis in yellow and an x-axis in green, or something to that effect. So if you look here, you can use the draw tool, and in this case, I've used the draw tool to take a real world item and assign an angle to it, right? So I've got my angle right there. I've drawn this on top. So I'm still here within the draw tool, and once I hit that blue done, you'll see it comes back out here, and this is another layered on top of my picture. So I have my photograph there, and then I have this drawing right on top of it. And so any of your items, for those of you who are familiar with Book Creator already, you can tap on the screen and you can grab one of those blue corners and expand this or shrink it, which is one of the cool things about the draw tool. If you don't get it right the first time, you can reposition and place it there as well. So you can see here that when I go to add something else and move away from the highlighted with the blue dots to just ready to keep going, it layers that draw that illustration that I've done right on top of the page. So we have the photo tool, which lets me snap a picture. Photo tool, excuse me, which lets me take a picture from the past and add it in, and that's where my screenshots will be too. My camera tool, which lets me snap a picture in the moment, like this real world coffee cup that you can see here on the table, as well as take a video, which is perfect for reflections in the math classroom. So the next piece, which is really where the bulk of our writing and math will happen, is the text tool. So the text tool allows us to label, to add our vocabulary words, to give step-by-step instructions. So each page might be a new step that students are following to solve a math problem, or it's all snuck into one paragraph that goes onto the side of the page. Or this might be an opportunity for students to present an argument about why their way is the best way to solve a particular math problem. So if you take a look at this example right here on the page that we looked at before, when I go to that plus sign up at the top, I have the option to add text right underneath my pen or my draw tool. When I go to do that, this box pops up on the screen. And so here you can see I've written this angle is obtuse, and obtuse angle is more than 90 degrees and less than 180 degrees. So at this point, you are adding text. Your students are adding text right within this text box. The customization, the movement on the page will come after. So this is a space where you might have students working off of a set list of vocabulary that's specific for the unit. You might have modeled for students using that step-by-step vocabulary, or with sentence starters like, I know this is a blank angle because, or however you've set up students for success in your specific classroom based on your grade level or the subject matter that you're teaching within a particular unit. So you'll see here that now my sentence, or my two sentences are here on the page. When my items are highlighted, you'll see that blue box go around, and that gives me the option to make changes. So whenever an object is highlighted, so we have that blue around it, you can go ahead and tap this I, this inspector button here at the top, and this gives me all of the options that I need for customizing the text. So you'll see here I have the option to make the text larger, I have the option to bold, italicize, underline, and the font here as well. And so one thing I like to mention when we are talking about font is that Book Creator has an open dyslexic font. So it's great for children who are creating a final piece that's going to be shared with a large audience, or if you're working with a student who is dyslexic, and having that for them to be easy to read. You know, Book Creator is one of the few apps that really goes above and beyond and comparative, at least to what we see other folks doing when it comes to making great accessibility features. And so they've really done a great job of including different features for accessibility within, and that's one of them. So I like to give a shout out when we look at the font there. One thing to notice that we're going to talk more about as we look at the shape tool is there's also the option to move the text to the back or the front. So I could change this text to white and then move it and place it on top of this image if I wanted to, but I would want to make sure it was on top of the image, because right now we have the page, the picture, the yellow draw, and then the text, which could go on top of all of that. The next tool I want you to take a look at is the shape tool. And if you don't have it out already, you'll want your iPad next to or nearby you with a Book Creator and a page open as we get ready to play a bit this evening. So the shape tool is really fantastic. It's perfect if you are working with geometry in your classroom, or you're just looking for students to create some features, some text layout features as well. So they can create shapes, they can layer shapes on top of one another, they can segment shapes when they're representing fractions or parts of a shape, and you can also have students color code. So earlier with the draw or the pen tool, I mentioned that you might have students who are color coding everyone label the obtuse angles yellow, and so on and so forth. You can have students do the same thing here. So if you look up at the top of your page to that plus sign, before when we hit the plus sign, we saw the camera, the photos, the pen, the draw tool right there. Take a look down at the bottom. Before I was on the media option, now I'm on the shapes option. And so this is going to take me out to a variety of different shapes. Now the squares won't always be blue and the circles won't always be magenta. I'm going to take you through and how you can customize those pieces as well. So you can tap on whichever one you'd like to add to your page. You'll see here I've added 2 blue rectangles. I've also added a red triangle on top. And so I can move those pieces around, I can stretch them out, I can spin them in different directions as well. And just like the text tool we saw, when the element on the page is highlighted, when there's those blue dots around it, I have the option to customize. And so what I can do here is I can change the color, I can add shadow or a border, and there's my layout again. So if you have students who might be layering one shape on top of another, they can do that piece too. And so this is your option, and you'll see me do it here on the next slide, right? I can now combine 2 of these simple shapes to make a more complex shape just by changing the colors. No one knows, unless they were the one creating this, that this was 2 separate shapes. When I come out, you'll see here that they're put together this way. And so when we talk about the writing in the math classroom, you might have students writing complete sentences or step-by-steps, or really pushing them with including vocabulary within sentences, like we saw with the obtuse angle example. Or you might simply have students taking one of the vocabulary words, carefully typing it, and adding that text to their page for labeling. So you can see here that students can add those labels to their page. You might have them do this with the pen tool, right? Instead of drawing a shape, they might just write out the name of it if that's easier for them. Or they might use the voice tool. Now, the voice tool is fantastic whether you're working with high school students or whether you're working with kindergartners. It's a way for students to be able to explain their thinking as they become more proficient writers. So you might have a 9th grader who is proficient as a conversational English, but has trouble writing incomplete sentences. While they're building their confidence in doing that and their skills, mastering those skills, they can still explain their thinking in math by using the voice recording tool. It's also something that your younger students who could explain to you what it is that they're doing, or maybe are ready to reflect on some of their problem-solving strategies, can record their voice and add that recording button on the bottom. So this is perfect if you have your students maybe working in partners to create a book that explains all the different ways to solve a problem. Record their voice on each page, in addition to having their text added to the page. This might be something where you have certain students in your class using the voice recording tool and others writing in 5 or 6 sentences for each page. So you can differentiate your expectations for how their final product will look. The voice tool is also really useful. Say you're working with a group of 5th graders and they're creating a book of math riddles for kindergartners. Well, the kindergartners might not be able to read 5th graders, multiple sentences on a page. They can put those sentences on the page, but then also record their voice. So just something to think about when you're thinking about audience as well. So what I want you to do, take a look right here, and I'm going to have you come back and try it in just a moment, is go ahead and you can see that with that plus sign, I can add now sound to my page. So when I go to press sound, you'll see the recording button pops up on the screen. If for some reason this isn't working for you, it might be because when you first open Book Reader, or the first person to use Book Reader on your iPad, when it asks for permission to use your microphone, it might have come up and said, You might have just instinctively said no. I know I'm like that when something pops up and asks me to do something. You can always go into your settings and you can change the permissions to allow the microphone to work. So if you're having an issue, that's usually the number one reason that that issue has popped up. So you might have students on a page like this explain how they were able to categorize the quadrilateral and the pentagon, why they're different, and so on and so forth. So they can press that red button and it'll start to record. As soon as they are finished, they can go ahead and save the recording, and it'll pop up as this button on the page that can be moved around to all different pieces. So depending on the way that your students save and share their final product will depend on how useful it is for them to include this voice piece as well. So before we jump into some of my favorite math apps to use with Book Creator, and ways that you can inspire writers in your math classroom, I'd love you to open up Book Creator, if it's not open already, and snap a picture of something nearby. Maybe it's the corner of your desk or a kitchen cabinet or something that's in your range. And I'd love for you to snap a picture and use text, voice, drawing tools, maybe try a little bit of all of the above to show and discuss one of the angles in the picture, similar to my obtuse coffee cup angle example. And while you're doing that, if you have questions, you can put them into the GoToWebinar question box, and I'm going to check in on the questions while you play around with a few of these tools. We'll take just about 2 or 3 minutes to go through some questions and to have you play around with these features. So Lawrence asked about rotating shapes. Yep, once your shape is highlighted, and if you're playing around with shapes as you're snapping pictures and annotating them, when your your shape is highlighted and you have those blue dots on the corner, you'll just use your 2 fingers. You can pinch and then you can spin as well with doing that. I have a question about inserting a video. So if you have a video that's recorded and saved in your photos, or in your camera roll, as we used to call it, you can go ahead and insert it that way because it's saved to your device. Maria was asking some questions about the Book Creator app. There's the free version, then there's the paid version, the full version, which you do have to pay for. You can get volume purchasing discounts at your school for buying it in bulk, and that's going to let you create as many books as you want, where the free version does limit you to that one book for yourself as well. So keep on snapping a picture of something nearby, using your text, maybe recording your voice as well, and you can keep those questions coming in. I'll get to as many as we can, but we're going to finish up our last few minutes together by talking about some of my favorite math apps to use with Book Creator. Now, these are ones where you can have students take a snapshot, screenshot like you saw earlier with the number line example, and then they can explain their thinking, talk about what it is that they did when they were in the app, and use that vocabulary that you've set aside for as well. So the first one is that one I mentioned earlier. I know I had a question about which was the one I mentioned earlier, and that is the apps from the Math Learning Center. So the Math Learning Center, you could check out their website, or you can type in Math Learning Center into the App Store. There are 10 apps that they have totally free for the iPad. Geoboard is the one you saw in the first teacher story example. Numberline is the one I shared with you. Number Pieces is great. It's just like having an infinite number of base 10 blocks. Same thing with pattern shapes, just like an infinite number of them as well. The Money Pieces app gives you all money manipulatives. So of course you could have students with the actual manipulatives in your class on your desk, moving them around and snapping a picture. If you don't have those extra resources, or say you're working with students at an older grade and you don't have the manipulatives they need for really helping them understand, you can use these virtual tools as well. The next one I want to share is Explain Everything. This is another one for having students get ready as writers in the math classroom. So if you're not familiar with Explain Everything, it's a really fantastic tool that you can use to create screencasts or videos, like video tutorials. So just a couple of the key features that make Explain Everything great for using to create a math tutorial, and then of course saving it as a video and putting it into Book Creator, is that you can have students use the shape tool and draw and group shapes within Explain Everything. If they're talking about shapes, there are a few different choices for them as they're using the pencil tool. Same with a highlighter. And then there's what I like to think of as the virtual laser pointer, but you can also have students use it with an arrow as well. So if they have written out all the steps and gone through solving a math problem, they can use one of these pointer tools to help explain their thinking. The next app that is wonderful for taking that screenshot and then using Book Creator to create a finished product that explains thinking is Desmos, where you can use this graphing tool to have students create pretty fantastic high-level finished products, and then they can snap a picture and they can bring it into Book Creator to explain their thinking. So really a wonderful way for them to take what might be happening during different times of the day in their iPad and bring it into a creation tool where some kids might be using their voice to explain, and other students might be writing incomplete sentences with very specific vocabulary. So as we get ready to finish up, I'd love for you in the question box to type in one way that you plan on using Book Creator in your math classroom this year, and it's also your opportunity to put in any questions that you have, and we can address as many as we have time for this evening. So Stephanie asked about leaving the Book Creator app to take pictures. So you might have your students already taking pictures at another part of the day and then putting them into Book Creator. But when you press that camera option, students will stay in Book Creator and they can snap their picture and it'll automatically go on the page for them. Diane asked about different students using Book Creator. So some apps do have like logins with student passwords and all of that. Book Creator doesn't have that. What you might want to think about if you have students using or sharing the same device is taking a look at the Apple Classroom app. It's new. I've seen it in action. It's really fantastic. And that might be a way to think about having kids just access their own work within what's been saved to the cloud for their specific system. I like how Diana shared that she could see her students using Book Creator to keep a math problem solving journal. Maria plans on using some of these apps that I shared as part of what students will be writing about in the math classroom. Kimberly mentioned that Book Creator could be used for math portfolios as a summative kind of final assessment at the end of a unit. Lots of great things coming in. If I didn't get to your question, or you have something that pops up tomorrow, or you are watching this recorded, you can go ahead and send that email to monica@classtechtips.com, and I'll make sure that I get you an answer to your question about using Book Creator. So I want to thank you for joining us for this special monthly series on using Book Creator to increase writing opportunities in your math classroom. Every month, Book Creator is doing a special webinar. You'll see in the YouTube channel that there are the recordings for webinars in the past, and you can check out Book Creator's website to see the upcoming webinars for September, November, October, November, and so on. If you are brand new to Book Creator or you have some lingering questions about how to use the tool, you can also go to Book Creator's website and sign up for our special Getting Started with Book Creator live webinar events. Our next one will be held in the beginning of September. So thank you so much for joining me this evening for our monthly Book Creator webinar series. I hope that you'll reach out with some of the ways that you are using Book Creator in the classroom using that hashtag Book Creator. Thanks so much and have a wonderful rest of your evening.